Minecraft has been around for almost 10 years now. It recently made a resurgence into mainstream gaming, but has never gone away, having consistent players over the last decade. Part of the reason for the longevity of the game is the music. Minecraft music is somewhat unique in the world of mainstream video games, and it is much more reminiscent of indie game soundtracks. This is because it draws its influence from indie games, according to the composer C418. During a panel about the creation of the music of Minecraft, he showed the main games that influenced the music he created, all of which were indie games. There are two main factors that influence the reasons for the Minecraft music taking on the qualities of an indie game soundtrack. One of those was a focus on the longevity of the game, or the ability to play the game forever, which meant that the music couldn't be annoying at all. It had to have a generic quality to it that allowed it to be accessible to everyone. Another important factor is that Minecraft has no scripted events, which means that there is nothing to trigger a change in the music. Because of this, there can't be any music created specifically for a certain area, an encounter, a battle, or any of the usual triggers that exist in most video games. This means the music of Minecraft must be able to be applied at any point in the game. These two factors lead to what we hear now, a slow-paced, calming, almost melancholy soundtrack that helps set the mood for the endless possibilities the game leaves the player. Now, in the game normally, you start with a diegetic musical silence before any music accompanies you. I've silenced the music over this playthrough because in the game, there's a 10 to 15 minute break between the tracks, which leaves a large amount of time for me to have nothing to comment on. So I have the track running without breaks in the background. We are now listening to the song titled Minecraft, which is said to be the first and last song of the game by the composer C418. This song is in a major key and quadruple meter, played with an array mbira, strings, and a piano in a very slow tempo, which gives it a very relaxed feel. There is an emphasis on the first and third beats in each measure, and the attacks are sharp from the array mbira, but soft from the strings. The song feels almost like one from a music box playing a lullaby. It starts quiet and slowly builds in volume towards the middle, and then slowly fades back into nothing, giving it somewhat of a cyclical nature. This fits the game well, as Minecraft is a game of repetition. You'll see here that I have been slowly gathering materials this whole time. The rhythm of the game seems to match the music being slow, methodical, and somewhat repetitive, while maintaining enough variation to keep from becoming a bore. Depending on what your goals are in the game, there can be a near infinite number of possibilities as to what you can do. What remains constant, however, is the collection and subsequent placing of blocks. Even if your goals aren't focused on building, but fighting, you will still need to gather materials for your weapons, armor, and food. It is here that we hear the first unique in-game sound design. At the beginning you have footsteps and ambient noise, but I think that the first unique sounds come from mining. Here you hear me breaking into some coal to collect so that I can actually cook some food, and there are many other things that you can do with coal, such as make torches to light up dark areas, which I should be doing here. In the background you hear a zombie that must be in another cave because he can't reach me. As you go up, I go to collect other materials, looking around to see what's available. I see some more coal on the surface, and you can hear the pickaxe grinding into the material as you hit it. And for coal blocks, you can receive XP, which is accompanied by a ding. You hear the crunch of the footsteps on the snow, another growl of the zombie as we go to traverse across the world. The jumps of bunnies, and a continual crunch of snow as we approach a bunch of pigs. Unfortunately, to get food, you do have to kill some of the animals. But you hear the sound design coming out again with different sounds for the pigs just interacting versus being attacked. Now it's time to cook up some food. And here you'll hear yet another unique in-game sound of the furnace cooking. You'll see also that the furnace melts the snow around it, which is just a small detail that helps to immerse you in the world. The in-game sounds serve as ambient noise that immerses you in the world. Whether it's the crunch of the footsteps, the sound of the animals, water rushing into your ears from going underneath, lava bubbling, or the sounds of mining, all come together to set up the diegesis and give players a haptic feedback for their actions. Each click comes with its own sound, whether it's the swinging of the sword or pickaxe, or eating food. Every action has a sound attached to it. This helps to immerse the player in the world and reward actions. This is especially important for my argument that the music in Minecraft begins to be tuned out by the player. It becomes somewhat of a psychological silence in which it is repetitive enough and generic enough that it fades into the back of the player's consciousness until eventually they barely recognize it's there. I think that this is an important distinction because I do think that the game still requires the music. Even if the player doesn't consciously recognize that it is there, it serves to stimulate the brain and keep the player engaged in what can become a very monotonous game of collecting materials or traversing the map. The fact that it has 10 to 15 minute breaks between each song lulls the player into a false sense of focus in which they either forget that music plays during the game, or they're so focused on what they're doing, they might assume that the music is still going in the background, it's just lowered in volume or being overtaken by the diegetic soundscape. This is where the longevity of the music and the game come into play. While the music of the game isn't tied to any in-game event, it lives past that. It serves a more important purpose than short-term storytelling for the player. It serves the purpose of engaging the subconscious so that the player doesn't mentally fatigue after strip mining for hours, looking at small tunnels and avoiding lava pools, to provide engagement for players that have been placing blocks to build their giant mansion for the last 4 hours. It helps to add variation to a never-ending world. It's in these times, when a player has been on for a multitude of hours, that the music becomes a psychological silence. When they have heard the entire soundtrack and it seems like one song turns into another, and you don't notice where they begin or where they leave, because you've heard them so many times. When you don't have the mental fortitude to focus on small things like musical change, because you've been placing blocks for the last 3 hours and you're almost done building that sailboat. Those are the moments that the soundtrack actually plays its role. Music isn't something that's necessary when you first start playing. It allows you to keep going when you would have quit without the small change that you might not notice, but your subconscious does. Dr. Plink describes psychological silence as a symbolic silence created by ambient music and habituation to the musical stimuli. Stasis lulls the player into contemplative inwardness. Minimalist textures create discursive spaces for the player to insert herself into emotionally complex and highly psychological narratives. This definition has a couple of things that stand out to me when it comes to the music of Minecraft. The first is ambient music. As I have discussed already, the soundtrack of Minecraft was created to be an unintrusive, ambient music that isn't annoying. If I had to assign a genre to the Minecraft soundtrack, I would say that it is ambient instrumentals. Next, it mentions habituation. The game of Minecraft, while it has boundless applications, is inherently a habitual game with a repetitive rhythm of gathering and then placing blocks. The more you play, the more recurrent these two become. I would say that the game can be boiled down to these two actions at its core. Because of this, the more that you play, the more ingrained these tasks become until they are muscle memory. Other than which blocks to place where, or which to gather, the act of retrieving and depositing becomes second nature. Because of this, there is a certain amount of contemplative inwardness that comes with playing the game. Many say that it is very therapeutic and use the game to de-stress by letting their mind go blank while they absently mine blocks. It is a form of meditation that helps to quiet the mind for many people. I would say that minimalist textures would speak for themselves, seeing the art style of the game, but the simplification of the world into blocks whose textures are also blocks is about as minimalist as the game can get while still being recognizable for what it is. Dr. Planck goes on to elaborate about psychological silence of how the brain appreciates repetition, recognizing and parsing what we are hearing, but eventually tuning it out as a non-threat. In the case of Minecraft, there are several threats to watch out for, one of the scariest of which are the creepers. But they tend to sneak up behind you at the worst times, and if they get close enough, they explode. Because of the repetitive nature of the gameplay, and the nature of the music, which fits into Dr. Planck's categories of music players habituate to more quickly, being slow, soft, and sparse, with only one track every 10 to 15 minutes, the two drop from the player's conscious rather easily, especially after extended periods of playtime listening for threats that the game imposes. Whether it is the slow-tempoed, almost dystopian, melancholy soundtrack or the repetitive nature of the gameplay, Minecraft is set up to relax the player's consciousness over time. It is meant to stimulate the subconscious, allowing players to stay engaged in the gameplay and focused enough to keep from mentally fatiguing too quickly. The sparse nature of the music keeps it from being too invasive or repetitive, as the soundtrack is relatively short for the sheer amount of hours people put into the game. This combination allows the players to slip into the world of the game and let their mind rest while they collect and place blocks en masse and let the music drift past their conscious mind to engage the subconscious, becoming a psychological silence that enables the game to be one of the most successful even after a decade. You can see here that I'm currently engaging in the repetitive nature of collecting and placing blocks to build a wintry getaway cabin. And you can get a glimpse of what makes this game truly amazing. Moments like this are what the game is about. After working hard to collect the resources and turning them into the right pieces and putting them in the right places, you can make something that tells a story. None of this would be possible without the music, at least for me, because I would never make it to the end of a project.